Haason Reddick already wants to be traded. What's going on, football fans? It's Mitch here with breaking news. Haason Reddick, 2022's NFL leader in forced fumbles, one of the leading sackers in the NFL. He already wants to be traded. He was traded from the Eagles to the Jets. The Eagles signed the Jets pass rusher Bryce Huff. And now the Jets, they have trouble on their hands. They have to figure out what to do with Haason Reddick. Do they keep him? Do they try to work out some sort of substantial contract agreement? Do they let him go for probably nothing, probably peanuts, and just cut their losses on what was supposed to be an epic addition to the Jets pass rush and Super Bowl contending team? That's at least what they hoped in 2024. So I'm going to discuss the biggest trade destinations, trade possibilities for Haason Reddick in this live stream. But before I get started with the destinations for Reddick and where he could potentially land and the teams that I'm looking at in terms of who needs an edge rusher, who needs a guy that can go out there and create a big play off the edge, a guy that can have a double-digit sack season. That's basically what I'm counting down here, as well as teams that have financial flexibility to make this move, teams that may have a strong culture to take on a guy that didn't want to play with the Jets, so you're going to have to convince him to play for you. So there's a lot of different factors with that. And also teams that the Jets may actually want to trade with. So probably not teams within their division. Okay? But before we get started with the list, I do want to read the report from the New York Jets. The Jets put out a statement, and this is according to Joe Douglas, the GM of the Jets. So a statement from GM Joe Douglas of the Jets says, "We have informed Haason that we will not trade him." Despite me making this video, Joe Douglas is saying, "We have informed Haason that we will not trade him, that he is expected to be here with his teammates, and that he will continue to be fined per the CBA if he does not report. Since the trade discussions back in March, we have been clear, direct, and consistent with our position. Our focus will remain on the guys we have here as we prepare for the regular season." So they're going to prepare for the regular season without Haason Reddick, but Joe Douglas, the general manager of the Jets, has made it clear that he's not trading him. But I don't care. I don't care, Mr. Joe Douglas. We're still going to make this video. We're still going to talk about the teams that could use Haason Reddick and the best fits for Haason Reddick. So you guys let me know in the live chat. Okay, let's begin with the first team that came to mind for Haason Reddick. That's the Atlanta Falcons. Now, this is one that I thought could happen earlier in the offseason. And now, especially post-draft, where we sit with the Atlanta Falcons, this move would make a ton of sense. The Falcons did not address their biggest need on their entire roster, and it was not, believe it or not, backup quarterback in the draft. As a team that signed a veteran quarterback in his mid-30s, coming off an Achilles tear to a massive contract, looking to contend in the NFC and win their division, one of the missing pieces for the Atlanta Falcons is a real, capable, game-breaking edge rusher. And Haason Reddick, I would not say is an elite edge rusher, but I would say he's a very good edge rusher, especially as a pass rusher. The numbers speak for themselves, right? 2022, Pro Bowl season, 2023, Pro Bowl season, 16 sacks in 2022, 5 forced fumbles, which led the NFL. Last year, 11 sacks. The last 4 years, at minimum, 11 sacks. Now, he is a little bit on the smaller side as an edge rusher. He was actually drafted as an off-ball linebacker at 6'1", 240. But he's quick, he's twitchy, and his bend and finesse allows him to get to quarterbacks. I think it would fit in Atlanta. Raheem Morris needs a guy that can go after the quarterback. And if they're going to be an offensive-led team, running the football with Bijan Robinson, open it up to Drake London, Kyle Pitts, it would be nice to have a closer on their pass rush. Somebody that in the fourth quarter can create pressure, turnovers, sacks, and stops. And I think Reddick is that guy. When you look at the Falcons, Lorenzo Carter, Arnold Ebiketie are their projected starters. I believe they already lost one of their draft picks to injury, who was drafted to be one of their edge rushers. That's Trice, who hit IR like this week. So they desperately have a need there. They have one of the worst edge positions in football, and in general, one of the least talented front sevens in the NFL. So they need someone like Reddick. Now, that being said, they don't have a lot of money. So they'd have to figure out the financial terms for Reddick in 2024. But I feel like that is doable. So I'm still going to include them on this list as a team that desperately, an NFC team that wants to make the playoffs, be a contender, needs a Haason Reddick. Okay, so Reddick to the Falcons. The second team that makes sense is a former coach of Haason Reddick's, and that is Jonathan Gannon of the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals definitely need defense. I think you could make a strong argument that the Cardinals have the least talented defense on paper in the entire NFL. Jonathan Gannon worked with Reddick at his peak of 16 sacks in 2022, 5 forced fumbles in 2022. One of the 10 best edge rushers, if not one of the 5 best edge rushers in 2022, right? So why not go back to that scheme and that coach? So it would allow Reddick to buy in because he would understand the system pretty easily. He wouldn't have to, go through some sort of stretch to make this work from a schematical standpoint, and he'd feel comfortable with Gannon coaching him. Gannon would also have a massive boost to his main area of concern because he's a defensive first coach, and they really don't have a game-breaking edge rusher on their team either. They drafted a first-round pick, and he, to me, is not like a pure edge rusher, 10 sack, double-digit sack, bunch of forced fumbles type of guy. Like, Dennis Gardeck led this team in sacks last year. Half the chat watching this video right now don't even know who that is. So I think they definitely could use an edge rusher. And if the Cardinals do get a little bit of defense involved on this team, they have the offense to be a competent team, even in a tough NFC West in 2024. The Cardinals definitely have money to move around and pay for Haason Reddick. And again, if you're going to be a team that trades for Reddick, you're going to be a team that not only needs him, needs that position, needs that production, but understands that him fitting in your defense, him fitting in your system is going to be smooth. It's the easiest way to acquire a player. So to me, the Cardinals make a ton of sense. Next up, I'm adding the Detroit Lions to this list. The Detroit Lions are a team that I don't necessarily think fit the mold, so to speak, for Reddick in terms of they don't typically go after smaller edge rushers that are more finesse than power or length. Typically, they like their edge rushers to be big, more edge setter types, longer in, arm length, physicality, things like that. But they do, on the opposite side of Aiden Hutchinson, need an edge rusher that can get after the quarterback. And the Lions do have a lot of cap space right now. And the Lions are also in the Super Bowl window. And the one biggest area of need for the Lions you could make a strong argument is the edge rush position. They kind of fulfilled their secondary requirements this offseason by adding Carlton Davis and Terrion Arnold and making some moves this offseason for their secondary to increase that area of their team. But edge rusher was kind of unaddressed outside of a boomer bust signing in Marcus Davenport. Now, Houston is somebody that I know they like, but Houston is also in a similar mold to Haason Reddick, which actually makes me believe that I feel like this move could happen, because even if Reddick were in some sort of rotation, he would be extremely valuable come playoff time against the best pass offenses, the best offenses in the league, the best quarterbacks in the league. You know, imagine the Lions in the playoffs when they're playing the 49ers. They need to be able to pressure Purdy, right? So having that one more guy that can get after Purdy and potentially get them to the Super Bowl, that would be a big difference maker for them. So they have the money. They have a culture that I feel can take on any personality and make it work and make them buy in. And they are in a window where they could afford to maybe overpay Reddick a little bit, bring him in, make him happy, and fit him right in alongside Aiden Hutchinson. And that could really complete their overall roster. There's not many things this team really needs. Probably the biggest thing they need is a second edge rusher. It would also take pressure off Reddick. He wouldn't have to be the number one guy either. Next up, we've got the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams are a defense that desperately needs pass rush. They lost Aaron Donald, arguably the greatest defensive player we've ever seen, or at least since Lawrence Taylor, right? So that's a big loss. Now, they did add multiple picks to the front seven in the draft, but think about it. This is a team that has Matthew Stafford. This team needs to maximize Matthew Stafford's window to win as many football games, as many Super Bowls as possible. I understand they already have that ring, so they're safe. But if you're Sean McVay and if you're the Rams organization, why would you not want to continue to push for a Super Bowl championship with Matthew Stafford? One more, right? Cooper Kupp's getting a little bit older. There's almost that limit of taking this Rams team to championships, to NFC championships. And one of the bigger needs for this team is defense in general, but pass rush. You look at their pass rush, and they desperately need somebody to help them out. Like Kobe Turner's a good player. Braden Fisk was a second-round pick. I think there's limitations to his game. Jared Verse could be good as a rookie, but he's a rookie. On the opposite side of Jared Verse, you have Byron Young. But why not add another guy in there? They have plenty of cap space to make this work. They don't really have any needs on offense, at least short term. Their offensive line's in good shape. Their receiving core is loaded and deep. Their running back position is well suited. Kyron Williams. They drafted Blake Corum. They don't really have a lot on offense they need to address. It's really defense. They address the secondary with Tre'Davious White, with Cameron Curl, with Darius Williams. But one extra difference maker in their pass rush could really make the difference and also help make up for the loss of Aaron Donald. So Haason Reddick would make a lot of sense, especially if you consider if Atlanta makes sense from a schematical perspective with Raheem Morris. You would think that with Chris Shula, kind of the same vibe defensively, same sort of defensive scheme, it would make sense for Reddick to land with the Rams. Next up, you have the Washington Commanders. The Commanders are one of the next teams that could potentially land Haason Reddick. The Commanders need edge rushers and defensive playmakers in general. They have Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen in the middle. They have Frankie Louvu, who they signed at linebacker, Bobby Wagner for a short period. Their secondary is pretty rough, not the best cornerback position. But this is a team that has a lot of money. Dan Quinn loves his edge rushers. And when you think of the fit for Haason Reddick with Dan Quinn, just think of Micah Parsons, a guy that was drafted as an off-ball linebacker who had some versatility to play the edge, Reddick ends up playing the edge full-time in the NFL once he finds it really with Arizona after a couple of years of struggling in the NFL. He found his role in the NFL with the Cardinals. Then he went to the Panthers. Then he went to the Eagles. And he really has had this consistent pace of 11, 10 plus sacks. And they're both like off the ball, quick, a jolt of energy off the edge. You know, not the biggest guys, not the most powerful guys, but extremely athletic, great dip and bend around the edge, very quick. So utilizing that skill set is not foreign for Dan Quinn. He utilized that same skill set in Atlanta with, you know, multiple guys like Vic Beasley, if ever anybody remembers him, guys like that. So his lineage of edge rushers, primarily a little bit smaller, quicker, twitchier, guys that get off the ball fast. I think Reddick would fit that mold pretty well. And the Commanders desperately need edge rushers because if you're going to have Dorrance Armstrong as your number one edge rushing threat, it's not exactly ideal, right? He was the number 3 in Dallas. He's not truly a number 1 option. So Reddick to the Commanders, that might not be exactly the favorite place for Reddick to go in terms of winning now. But if the Commanders believe that Jaden Daniels is legit, they've made enough improvements with their offense, Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive line, things like that. They may believe well enough that in this division, they could make a little bit of a run this year, or at least within the next couple of years. So Reddick could be a veteran addition to this team. The Chicago Bears are another team that I think would work. The Bears added Montez Sweat. I almost said Josh Sweat. They added Montez Sweat to their pass rush last season, and he was an instant difference maker for that front, right? He was a guy demanding double teams, a guy that was just in the backfield with relentless effort, incredible athlete, right? Sweat is an all-around great rusher. If he does struggle in one area, I think it's consistent pressure. I think Reddick is a guy that is more of a consistent pressure conversion from pressure to sack. Sweat is more of an all-around edge rusher that really has very few flaws. He's more of a size guy, an athletic power guy, as opposed to Reddick, who's a smaller, kind of, quicker, twitchier guy. So that complement would be very nice, I feel like. And the Bears are sort of missing another edge rusher that even in a rotation of sorts could come off the bench and really feast. Okay. Plus, you think about what Matt Eberflus values in his defenses. He values front sevens. He values pass rush. He values front fours that can get after the quarterback. This is a guy that came from Indianapolis, where they spend all their money on their offensive and defensive lines. And they do have a young secondary that's pretty promising. They do have 2 linebackers that they paid a lot of money. The one piece on their defense that they're really missing is another edge rusher that can really scare quarterbacks and offensive lines. If they had that extra edge rushers, I don't think that they would really be a doubt that they're a top 10 defense in the NFL. So yeah, Reddick, Sweat, that would make for, pretty interesting combination. And it actually would be very similar to the Eagles, Reddick and Sweat. And the final team is the 49ers. The 49ers are the final team because the 49ers are always involved in these discussions. Plus, there is a communication and a level of respect between both front offices, right? Because of Robert Saleh and the relationship that he has with Kyle Shanahan and, of course, John Lynch. There would be some form of communication there that would make sense. On top of that, the Niners actually have like $40+ million in cap space. Now, the one thing that people will be saying is that they need to sign Brandon Ayuk, which is perfectly fair. But also, I'm not sure how much of that money would actually be utilized in 2024. So Reddick's money, I think, would more so be utilized in 2024. But if Reddick were willing to go to any team for more of a short contract, it'd probably be a team like the Niners, because it doesn't feel like the Jets would trade Reddick to the Bills. It's in the same division. It's unlikely that they would go through the embarrassment of trading him to the Chiefs. And the Chiefs don't have a ton of money. The Bengals don't have a ton of money. So teams that are AFC contenders, the Ravens don't have a ton of money. And the Ravens are usually involved in these conversations. The Ravens may be a little bit more realistic than those other options. But the 49ers would make sense. They're always involved in edge rusher conversations like Chase Young during last season. They've signed, I don't know how many different guys over the years. Like they've traded for guys like D Ford. They signed Leonard Floyd this offseason. They're always involved in edge rushers and defensive linemen. Javon Hargrave was a big signing from the Eagles, right? And Reddick would fit the Niners system. It's a pin your ears back, wide nine, typically type of defense where you're just looking for speed off the ball and to get to the quarterback. There's very few limitations in terms of asking these edge defenders to really set the edge and defend the run, right? Their importance is providing pressure on the quarterback. So Reddick's limitations might be solved in that defense to some degree. So I think Reddick would be a really nice addition in San Francisco as well. So the list that I have is the Niners, the Bears, the Commanders, the Rams, the Lions, the Cardinals, and the Falcons. Those are the teams that I thought of. There were others that came to mind for sure. Like I thought of the Bills, but I feel like that would just be stupid for the Jets to actually trade him to the Bills. I thought of the Ravens, but I feel like the Ravens don't have enough money. And also Reddick is not a great scheme fit for the Ravens. The Ravens typically like bigger edge rushers and more powerful edge rushers, like what they have in Oweh and they formerly had in Clowney. The Bengals would make sense, but I also feel like they probably spend that money on corner or secondary as opposed to edge rusher. Plus, the Bengals don't make a lot of trades. So that was something that I didn't really consider. I was trying to think of contenders. I thought of the Chiefs. In the NFC, Tampa kind of came to mind, but there weren't too many. So yeah, I feel like Reddick is still a good player. I think Reddick can still contribute to just about any defense. I think because of his size, he is a little bit more scheme specific than many other edge rushers in the league, because I think you need to properly understand how to get the most out of him and how to utilize him to his best. But I think over the last few years, you've seen him become one of the best edge rushers in terms of pass rushing in the NFL. Like I said earlier, 12.5, 11, 16, and 11 sacks. That production's pretty outrageous. And he's done it on 3 different teams and 3 different franchises: Arizona, Carolina, Philadelphia. I thought he was going to suit up for the Jets. I think he would be a pretty big loss for the Jets. They would have to be asking, for Will McDonald to really step up in year 2 if they do lose Haason Reddick. I do think McDonald's a good player, will be a good player, but I do think that would be a pretty substantial loss for them just in terms of certainty of what they were going to get. And Reddick really fit that Huff role really well because they're pretty much identical players, which is why the Eagles decided to go with Huff and why the Eagles decided to trade Reddick, because Huff is basically a younger version of Haason Reddick. Reddick's maybe a little bit more well-rounded, but yeah. So this is a weird situation. I've never really seen anything like this where a player has been traded to a team and the team never really even considered that they would have to sign him or have to negotiate with him. So I don't know if this is a tactic for the Haason Reddick camp or for Haason Reddick to get more money or whatever, because he kind of has the leverage in this situation, in my opinion. But I know that he'll be fined. But it just makes, because it makes the Jets look so stupid that they traded for a guy and he doesn't even want to play for them. It does feel like that Haason Reddick has the leverage. What do you guys think in the comments? What do you think is the most logical fit, and what do you think is the most likely fit? I think if I had to guess, that's actually a tough question. I'm bringing a tough question to myself here. I feel like the Falcons, in terms of football, would make the most sense. But I also feel like the Falcons don't really have the money, so they would have to figure that out. And the Falcons are just generally stupid. I'm not going to lie. I don't understand most of their moves. The Cardinals actually would make a lot of sense from a fit standpoint and a money standpoint, but they're not a winning team right now. So that might not allow Reddick to really want to go there. The Lions would make a lot of sense from a money and a winning standpoint, but maybe not as much a fit standpoint. But I do think the Lions should take that chance. The Rams, The Rams would really make a lot of sense in almost every fashion. So maybe they're the leader in that house. The Commanders are probably the least optimal in terms of because they're the furthest away from a championship. The Bears, I feel like, would be a missing piece sort of deal. The Niners would be like, let's just go for it. Let's try to win the Super Bowl type deal. Which we've also heard the Niners, they almost got Josh Uche from the Patriots in a trade for Ayuk. It was, I think it was Josh Uche and somebody else potentially and draft picks. So Josh Uche is like a speed rusher. So that would make a lot of sense if Haason Reddick was also to go to the Niners just because of that fit as well. Randy says the Bears Buccaneers style suits him the best. I thought of the Bucks because of the similarities to Shaq Barrett, who's no longer there. So it's not like you could have two Shaq Barretts. But now that you don't have Shaq Barrett, I feel like that would make sense to a certain degree. I also think that Reddick would be able to buy in because of the amount of veterans on the Bucks, especially their defense. So I feel like a guy like Levante David, Antoine Winfield, Vita Vea, these guys could really get some buy-in from Haason Reddick. And I do think he would be a huge difference maker for them because they really need an edge rusher. They haven't really had a great edge rusher since Shaq Barrett and Jason Pierre-Paul, maybe in like 2021. It's been a couple years since they've had a really good edge rusher. Even with Barrett there, he's kind of slowed down. Cousins even agrees on that about the Falcons. That's true. Better question. Would anyone pay what the Jets did to get him? Because the Jets don't want to trade him for a loss. I don't think so. I think the Jets would have to be willing to pay to get rid of him for a loss, unfortunately, because I think they kind of made such a mess of themselves there where they traded for a player where they didn't really know that he wanted to play for them or not. And they just assumed. So I think they're kind of in a bad situation. I think, honestly, if he were to get traded, it would probably be for less than what they traded for. Do I think Houston is realistic? No. I think Houston has a very solid edge rotation that they're very happy with. I think they have probably one of the strongest edge rotations in the league when you consider they have Danielle Hunter, they have Danico Autry, they have Will Anderson, they have Jerry Hughes, they have Derek Barnett. They have a really strong edge rotation. The Dolphins need another old guy. That is true. They can never do without another one. Lions can definitely use him. I agree with that. The Bears fire. Titans could use him. I just don't know if they would really be in the business of making another trade. They've already traded for like L'Jarius Sneed. So plus Arden Key is, I guess he's not the level of Reddick, but he's more of like a situational pass rusher type. I don't know about the Titans. The Titans would be a reach for me. I don't think that would really work. Texans to the bowl. 29's definitely getting up there, though, to be fair. Cowboys, I highly doubt it. When's the last time the Cowboys did something like that? Bills would be smart fit for Haason. I agree. It's just like that. The only way that happens is if he's cut, in my opinion, because the Jets are not going to trade Haason Reddick to the team that has Josh Allen on it in their division. It would be a great fit, though. I agree with that. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. The Jets told him all he needs to do is show up and they will negotiate. He won't even do that. Jets are content making him pay every day he misses to recoup all they can on him. Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. I mean, he very well might come back maybe like after 4 weeks of the NFL season. Who knows, right? But at the same time, we have to be open to the possibility of trades. It's similar to Ayuk in terms of like we don't really know what's going on, but this one's just weird because he hasn't even played for them yet. Detroit would be a good fit, says Kai. The Bears, yeah, I brought up the Bears as a fit for sure. I think that's honestly like the biggest need for the Bears and the Lions. Both those teams in that division. I think the biggest need is number 2 edge rusher on both teams. I think both teams have a pretty well-made roster with young players that are expected to ascend at certain positions of maybe viewed as weaker positions on their team. Like, let's just say the Bears at right tackle, for example. Like, Wright is expected to take a step forward as a first-round pick from last year, or nickel corner with Kyler Gordon. The Lions linebacker might be viewed as weaker on their team, but with Jack Campbell potentially stepping up, right, that could be an area where they get better, just for example. Or wide receiver 2, Jamison Williams could potentially get better if he plays better, right? Like, so in terms of like what those teams need and the actual player that is expected to play that position, that's probably the biggest need on both those teams. If he sits all season, Jets still retain his rights. I'm actually not sure what his contract is right now. I can look what his contract is. I would assume that he would need a new contract if he's... So yeah, he's only on a 1-year deal right now. So he would be a free agent. If he sat out the entire season, he would be a free agent. Right now, he's at a 14.25 base salary. So yeah, he basically becomes a free agent in 2025. The Eagles could definitely add him back. It just wouldn't make a lot of sense because they had to pay him, right? So why would the Eagles trade him if they weren't going to pay him in the first place and then trade back for him just not to pay him again? You know what I mean? They paid Huff instead. Yeah, he's a rental for this season, but basically how it would go is that, let's say the Lions traded for Reddick, they would just instantly sign him to like probably a 3-year deal with like 2 years paid and then 1 year voided. That's probably how it would work. Like Reddick would be a Lion for 2024, 2025, and then 2026 would be the voided year. That's probably the contract you're looking at with him, something like that. The Jets would have to target a player in return. So which of those teams match up best with the Jets looking for D tackle, edge, safety? Braden Fisk to the Jets, that would never happen as he's a second-round pick, like rookie. I don't know why a team would trade a rookie, but that's just me. The Rams, if they were going to trade a player, I'm not exactly sure that they would trade a player, to be honest. Maybe safety, like John Johnson, maybe something like that. O-line, they're fine. Receiver, Tutu Atwell might be added into a trade. Just thinking off the top of my head. I honestly don't think the Jets would be getting a player. Unless it's like a bidding war. Buda Baker, I doubt it. I don't think the Jets have a lot of leverage, to be honest. I think they would probably be getting less than people would think. What would Tampa give up? So what was he traded for? He was traded for a third, if I'm not mistaken. I'm trying to look. So the Jets sent a conditional 2026 third to the Eagles. That I think could have been a second rounder. That was in 2026, though. So that's 2 years from now. So yeah, I mean, they probably get like a fifth, something like that. Probably not much, because you got to pay him as well, right? And he's 29. So as good as he is, he's 29, and you have to pay him. So it would probably be like a 6th round pick. Or like a player and like a pick swap or something, like you're saying here, Joe Tryon. Yeah, that's possible. Something like that. Like the Cardinals, you know, could throw in a player. Something like that. All right. Anything else? If you guys haven't already, make sure to follow me here on Bleacher Report. Follow my profile for more NFL live streams. I'm going to be back for the third time today. In a couple hours, we're doing NFL trivia, which I'm excited for that. So make sure to tune into that. Follow me here. Also, you can find my YouTube channel, The Bottom Line View. I talk all 32 NFL teams, including a ton of off-season content and in-season content. Pretty much a video every day. So if you want to check me out there, that's cool too. All right, guys, I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know if you haven't already your favorite landing spot for edge rusher Haason Reddick in one of the craziest trade requests I've ever seen. It's Mitch. Peace.